watching today.
Mhm.
That's it.
Oh,
Wow, riveting.
I just watched probably the second worst Star Wars movie. So I thought that was pretty
Did you do
interesting.
that?
Just literally just now.
Oh wow, that's weird. Because I
You
think
never,
I just
never
did the same
seen
thing.
it before? That's so weird, guys. You're never gonna get this.
Hmm.
I just
You're
did
never gonna get this.
Never gonna get this. Shut
You
up.
did the same thing.
I did the same thing.
How did we
I
all
watched
watch
it.
the second worst Star Wars movie?
It's probably chance or coincidence.
It's
That's
the
my guess.
Force.
Yeah.
It was the Force.
Well, speaking of, I think that's what we're doing today on this episode of the NRDWave podcast, right?
Is that what we're doing?
We are
Are we-
reviewing the second worst Star Wars movie of all time, and that would be The Last Jedi. It's a real coincidence that we all watch the same movie.
I don't
That
care.
is a coincidence because I don't even think we planned this.
Yeah, it's almost as if we planned it, but we didn't. Just for the record. All right, all jokes aside, welcome to another episode of the NRDWave podcast. Today we're doing a review of The Last Jedi, and this is a continuation of our Star Wars reviews in honor of the month of May. May the 4th be with you. Say hi, guys.
Hi,
Hi
guys.
guys.
Got Kevin, Jay, and Bobby here, and we're going to review this movie for you. So, yeah, let's get started with our overall feelings. Any kind of, anything jump out at you guys in terms of how this movie made you feel overall?
Well, okay, so if I'm trying to stay more on the objective side, it's a well-made movie. I think it looks really good. The acting is almost all the actors do a really good job, I think, of portraying the role that they had written for them. I think it's an interesting thing that Rian Johnson wanted to do to flip the script and make a Star Wars movie different than any other Star Wars movie we'd ever seen. But honestly, that's not what fans really want. And I think it was more of a failure than anything else. I've got some reasons why later, but I guess we can go into that at that point.
All right, yeah, we'll get to that. What about you, Jay?
I mean, that was pretty much on the same lines. I'm agreeing with Bobby. The movie is beautiful, and I feel like it was executed pretty well. All the acting is great. The universe, the world is beautiful. I love how they brought Puppet Yoda back instead of CG Yoda. And then I can appreciate I guess maybe the original idea to turn things over and like maybe shake things up. As far as the script flip that Rian Johnson does, but I mean, like I said, we've had this conversation many times before. It just feels like it's not successful at all in what it does. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, my feelings are along the same lines as your guys as well. Again, the movie is beautiful looking. It continues onto the same kind of vibe that the Force Awakens introduced by having practical effects mixed in with the CGI to make sure that they're not in prequel territory.
Yeah.
I get what they were trying to do with making. They basically didn't want to make Empire Strikes Back again, and I totally get that. They were trying to make it something fresh, something that we haven't seen. That would it. I mean, I would hope that their intent was to make something that fans would appreciate, and that new people that are jumping on board could enjoy as well. And I'll expand on that more also. But I feel like this movie sort of, if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you would enjoy it. If you are a fan of Star Wars, you're gonna have problems with it, which I think us three in this room were 3 for 3 on believing that's the case.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I can appreciate what they were trying to do and make something new at least. But I think, like Jay said, it just missed the mark. It fell short.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's like Rian Johnson makes good movies. Like I really enjoy Looper. Knives Out is one of my very favorite movies of last year. Like that's a movie that I've watched twice now, and I think I could watch it, every other week and still enjoy it just as much as the first time. He makes good movies. He just really didn't understand what he was getting into by trying to change Star Wars so fundamentally. That's just not what you do.
Well, I've had the firm belief ever since this movie came out that he didn't really have an understanding of what Star Wars is or what Star Wars fans want to see. And my opinion has been supported by, newly supported by the voice actor of Darth Maul in the Clone Wars series, Sam Witwer. he thinks the same thing, that Rian Johnson, or that The Last Jedi just didn't understand Star Wars fans, or Star Wars as a property, and I think that's pretty evident when you watch this movie.
Speaking of that, it's funny because John Boyega, who obviously played Finn, for the last couple of years, he's been bagging on Star Wars, or on the sequel trilogy, like nonstop on Twitter. Like he clearly doesn't enjoy Star Wars because he was a good character in the first movie and then written so poorly beyond that. And it's funny to see him just not give one flying fuck.
I think that's actually a good segue into our second topic, which is favorite characters. For me, I don't think that Rey is like an inoffensive character in my opinion in this movie. She's not as much of a Mary Sue this time, I don't think. Maybe if I thought a little deeper, she might be, but she sort of doesn't do much. She's very passive. She's a passive hero. A lot of the stuff that we see involving her is just happening to her instead of her driving the story. Kylo is actually pretty good. I think that he's probably my favorite character in this movie because you see his descent more into the dark side, even though we see some conflict. When he says aim every gun at Luke towards the end of the movie, he's just consumed by this hatred. So I thought that was a good expansion on his character as a whole. So if I had to pick one, I'd have to say it was Kylo Ren.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Jay?
I'm gonna be on the same boat as you guys. Kylo Ren is still my favorite character in this movie. I think Poe is a close second. I think Poe was pretty much castrated as far as what he could have been doing in this movie. But just based on who he is and his stamp, not his stamp, just his personality and what he represents, I think is pretty cool. Kylo, going back to Kylo, we see, like you said, Kevin, you just see his descent into the dark side, but you do see some of his confliction when he's aiming at his mother's ship at the bridge, and then he decides not to shoot, but then it gets blown up anyway, and you see that moment of shock, and then you're going back to all he was about was getting revenge against Luke. And so when they're shooting all the cannons on Luke, and you just see he's just so consumed with hatred. It's like he's visibly shaking, and he's sweating.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's just like, I think Adam Driver does a great job playing this character. And then, the throne room scenes too. I mean, there's a lot of issues with it, but you see him kind of like,
he kicks ass.
He's kicks ass, but when Snoke is interrogating Rey, he's just passive, sitting in the background, and then I think like kind of like he's deciding then like, well, am I going to put up with this? Are we going to put up with this? This is my chance to take power, and then he does it, and it's kind of a dismal ending for Snoke, for someone who was built up to be so powerful before. So it's kind of disappointing there, but I think just like I said, Adam Driver does a great job playing this character.
Yeah, we're gonna get to disappointments and complaints in a bit, and Snoke will absolutely be on that list.
That could be longer than the actual movie itself, that portion.
Yeah.
As far as characters, I agree with you guys. I have two characters written down on my favorite characters list, and it's Poe and Kylo. Kylo has the most interesting scenes in the movie. I think everything with him and Rey are definitely the best parts of the movie. I think they're like the intertwining story is actually like fun and interesting to watch. Adam Driver, I think, is the MVP of this trilogy. Obviously, we have more to watch and to talk about there, but I think he's actually a really good actor here. Poe, I don't think he's given that much to work with, but I still think he's interesting because Leia and Holdo just have this weird opinion of him that he's just some punk flyboy who wants to cause damage and just wants to be a hero or look like a hero. But nothing he does in this movie ever appears to be anything but caring about all of his fellow rebels or resistance people.
Yeah.
He's in it to save lives every step of the way. So it's like I think that he, like, everything leading up to the mutiny and everything beyond that, I think he acted that out really well. So he and Kylo are definitely the two best characters for me.
Yeah, I really liked Poe in this too. It's just his story. The story surrounding him is really, it's stupid in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just dumb. But yeah, excellent acting. Everyone was really good, like you were saying. Adam Driver, I would agree, probably is the MVP of this series. I thought even though I don't like Luke's character in this movie, it was also well acted. I think Mark Hamill,
Yeah,
That's fair. Yeah.
he did a great job. So
he definitely matured over the 30-something years as
Yeah.
an actor.
oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
He doesn't need to go buy some power converters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Okay? So those are our favorite characters essentially. What about other things that we liked about the movie? We talked about the special effects and the overall aesthetic, how the movie looks. But were there any like story portions or anything more along those lines that you guys liked?
Like starting towards the very beginning, I really liked. It started off with too much humor, I think, right off the bat. But then once the action starts, you see like just the gravity of everything. You see like all these ships getting destroyed and like their panic to try and get some bombs off. The scene with Rose Tico's sister, where she basically knows she's gonna die, but then she gets the remote to release the bombs. Like that's a really good scene. Like it's really good looking. It's a fun space battle, but it's really well acted, I think, and it's just really well written, which is one of the few times you can say that about a scene in these movies.
It's got some good tension in it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But also, one of the things that I really liked is just they do a good job of showing how like grand these ships are. Their sheer size. Like when the dreadnought comes into frame at a light speed, you're just like, oh dang, that's stunning. And then
Yeah.
you can really feel its power when it destroys the rebel base with 3 shots and that whole thing. So yeah, that was all. That scene is pretty well done. Like you said, the humor is a little much, but it also had a purpose, even if it is a little bit annoying. We know what Poe's trying to do. So yeah, I'll give that first set piece some props.
Hmm. Let's see. As far as some other stuff that I liked, let's see. I wasn't a fan of what they did with Luke, but I think it was an interesting attempt to try and show a broken Luke. It's just, I feel like the way that he was broken was very poorly written. But I like the idea of what they're trying to go for, like a kind of like a gray Jedi with him. It's just they really poorly executed that.
Yeah,
I don't even know if they qualify as a gray Jedi. I think he just broken and he just gave up altogether. I think a gray Jedi lives in between, the light and dark, and understands that it's not black and white. There is gray. That's why they're gray Jedi. But Luke just like, what? I'm giving up altogether. I'm not going to use the Force. I'm shutting myself off.
Yeah.
So I think anyone along the lines of gray Jedi might be like, say, Ahsoka, or even close. Mace Windu was almost
right.
So.
Yeah, with his fighting style. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Jade? What were some likes that you had?
I think I really like the ship design as far as some of the empire, or not the empires,
I wish
the first order ships. Like we see the Snoke's big ass ship come through, and like you said, the grand
supremacy.
The scale, the supremacy of it all is just really cool. And then it's funny because you look back and you look at the Resistance; they're all still the old ships that they had from the first rebellion.
Right.
They have. I don't think there was any Mon Calamari ships, but just all the frigates and the cruisers and the stations.
Their flagship was Mon Cala.
Yeah,
that's why Akbar was the.
Yeah, Akbar was there. Yeah. Akbar. I was happy to see Akbar again, but that was short-lived.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kevin? What about? Oh, sorry, Jay. I thought you were done.
No, I'm good. Go ahead, Jeff. I think you already did it.
Yeah, well, I sort of supported Bobby's choice. Yeah, outside of that, I don't think there's not much that I liked in terms of how the plot plays out and story beats and that kind of thing. I'm gonna have a relatively long list for dislikes when it comes to this category, but yeah, basically that opening scene, I had some high hopes for the rest of the movie, and then it basically falls short from then on, which is so sad because I was super excited for this movie. I remember when the trailer came out, and I was just like, man, that's gonna be badass. We're gonna see some really cool stuff. Almost none of it was that cool.
I want to see someone broken. See Kevin after this movie.
Yeah, I remember. Just a quick aside, after we saw the movie and we were hanging out in the parking lot, or we were hanging out in the lobby of the movie theater first, our whole group of friends, and we were all just kind of like, did you like it? Did you like it? It was like, yeah, I guess. And I remember being like, I don't really know. And then after Pat and I were walking to our parking lot where our cars were because you guys had parked in a different spot. So we were walking and just talking along the way, and then we're like, "Wait, that was stupid. That was stupid. That was stupid." Like just listing off all this stuff. It was a huge disappointment for me. So with that being said, let's get into the next category with least favorite characters. We tried to stay as positive as long as we could.
Yeah, it's been really hard.
Yeah, it has. So least favorite characters. There's an obvious one here, but I'll let one of you guys take it. How about you?
I'll do it.
Go.
Rose Tico is my least favorite character.
Yes.
She is the most pointless person to be introduced in the story, so late in the story. I just don't understand what the purpose of her was, and just to disrupt, Finn trying to sacrifice himself, for the good of the whole crew. Her doing that, literally Bobby had mentioned, I think during the movie that
Mm-hmm.
all these people died just because, she had to stop Finn from sacrificing himself. One person was going to sacrifice himself and save the rest of the whole.
Yeah, that was actually me who said that.
That was you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I said she potentially just killed the whole resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of her choice.
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here too right now. My least favorite character, one of my other least favorite characters in this was, it's not on a limb. I was trying to be controversial. I was going to say Luke, but then I realized it's Holdo. Holdo is my least favorite character.
Jay, you can't take all the worst characters for yourself.
Yeah, Jay's like, I hate Snoke. I hate
Snoke. I didn't know.
I hate Rey. I hate
Snoke.
Kylo.
We actually got to see more of Snoke and see him, like, I think Snoke was actually pretty decent in this. He just had a shitty ending. Yeah. And there was no more elaboration.
He was barely in it. That's the thing that sucks.
Let's save that for the dislikes and complaints.
But Holdo, I mean, this is a person we never heard of before in any, not even in Force Awakens. We didn't hear the name Holdo, did we?
No.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden she's this person in charge after Leia's, unconscious from using too much force in space that she survived for a minute and a half without freezing to death.
Well, we could have got a legacy character to do it, like Admiral
Could have been
Akbar.
Akbar.
Yeah.
That would have been perfect.
Should have been
You
Akbar.
could have gotten some actual character from him.
Yeah.
And he could have done most of the same stuff and gotten the same effect.
Yeah. And Holdo just seemed like she's just throwing her weight around. She didn't really seem like she cared too much. Like, she's like, you're going to have to listen to me because I'm in charge. And there's no reasoning behind her being that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Rose and Holdo are my least favorite. I think they're both very pointless characters. And they're just introduced just because, I don't know, just to shake things up, or there is another agenda somewhere behind in the writing. But
there's been lots of accusations of that's for sure. But yeah, they feel very shoehorned in. It's like, oh, we just need to have somebody new, and so they're like, okay, let's force them into the story somehow. Even though we have existing characters that fans who will appreciate expansion on them could have worked better. So, what about you, Bobby?
Well, I've got Rose and Admiral Holdo on here. It's just they were not well written. Like you have Rose on here taking it upon herself to stun and imprison people who are trying to escape. It's like, yeah, it's desertion, but they're also gonna they're just on a course where they have Holdo who's not telling them what's gonna happen, so they all just think that they're gonna die. So she's taking it upon herself to screw those people over from trying to leave. It's just in concert, the two of them worked very terribly, and in like the worst possible way.
I mean, was that her job, her positioning? I think
she mentioned her job, and it was like something completely unrelated. I don't remember what it was. She was a security officer.
I said that during the movie. I'm like, why is she running security? Who is she?
Yeah, she's like a mechanic or something like that.
Yeah,
like
it made no sense. But it's like I just think that Holdo, like I mentioned this. We've talked about it multiple times. If they had worked like a mole into the story in some way, it would have fixed both Rose and Finn's storyline and Poe's storyline with Holdo, because she wouldn't have been telling anybody anything for fear of the mole giving information to the New Order.
Well, I don't have a ton to add with least favorite characters. You guys basically covered it, so let's just get right into the dislikes and complaints, because that's essentially what you're talking about, Bobby. That whole storyline with Poe being like, oh, you're just a cocky flyboy, we're not going to listen to you because blah blah blah. When he's when he was a high-ranking officer in the Resistance and had proved that he was there, like you were saying earlier, to save lives, there was no reasoning for them to keep that a secret from him. So that whole mutiny scene was totally pointless. So if they would have put a mole, like you were saying, it would have fixed everything. It would have made
Oh
it
my
so much
God.
better.
Yeah, the lack of trust would have been there. And
Yeah.
then to go back to like them not sharing anything with Poe, the first thing when Holdo meets Finn is she starts spewing some of them like, oh yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
reinject everyone in these vessels.
And he's already proven to be a traitor.
Yeah, and he's like
Which-
he's 3 days into being part of the resistance, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, which would have been the perfect opportunity to have a mole, because they could have suspected Finn to be giving them information. So this would have fixed two things. It would have made it so that the hyperspace tracking wouldn't have been necessary, because that's a world-breaking technology. It makes absolutely no sense. So it would have gotten rid of that, because the mole could have been feeding them their location, right? Could have been signaling, this is where we're at. The First Order can follow them. So it solves that problem. It also solves the not wanting to tell anybody what the plan is, because there's a suspected mole. And then they could have created a totally different side story for Poe and Finn and Rose, if you want, to go on to find Rey, or to
Poe should have been with them.
Yeah, or to prove Finn's innocence, or whatever it is, whatever the choice is. Anything to get away from my biggest complaint is the Canto Bight scene. All the Canto Bight stuff is ridiculous, and it's stupid. We don't need to see something like a modern casino setting in a Star Wars movie. It's supposed to be an old lived-in universe, not like this weird, like, bizarro world, essentially. It was just really weird.
You know what's funny about that? Because it totally feels like a different movie. It feels like a Star Trek movie, which is funny because JJ wasn't even directing this movie.
Yeah.
So
That's kind of
I just don't understand what was happening with it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
Jay?
just like it was 30 minutes of wasted time that we could have had story about, Rey being trained, or more behind of, possible the reasonings behind Holdo not telling anything to anybody, and it was just put in for the sake of being put in, and I don't understand.
I would have liked more of the training stuff, for sure. Like Luke and Rey's relationship, we should have seen way more of that. It was definitely wasted. He's going to teach her 3 lessons, and then doesn't he only teach her 1? Like, we don't even get what he says. He says he's going to teach her 3 things, and then he doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, sorry, it just bothers me so much that it's a 2.5-hour movie, and I feel like almost nothing is accomplished. Like, so little happens in this movie for it being 2.5 hours long. Like, if they had doubled the training time, and, like you said, just got more time with Luke, with Luke and Rey, I feel like it would have been a much better movie for that. It's like they cut corners at every possible step, and it really spited the movie.
Yeah.
Well, not to mention the whole Canto Bight sequence is like they go to Canto Bight to look for the master code breaker, right? So they find Benicio del Toro instead, and he rescues them. And they go to Benicio del Stutter. He takes them to the supremacy. They're on the supremacy to destroy a part, or I forgot what it was, the flux capacitor,
The hyperspace tracker,
the hyperspace drive tracker, or whatever. And then so that doesn't even come of it. They don't destroy that. Benicio del Toro betrays them, and they're just on supremacy. And then during that, Holdo does her Holdo remover and destroys the supremacy, and then they're on a shuttle back to what's the planet again?
Crate.
Back to Crate. And so literally what they did was fruitless, completely, absolutely fruitless, and did nothing.
To expand on that too, then while they're on the supremacy, Phasma is reintroduced into the story, and then immediately dies. So it's like
what was the point of bringing her back?
She's there for 2 minutes and then dies again. That's literally that feels like what the whole point of that scene was for, was just to get them on the ship so Finn could defeat Phasma for whatever reason, because she had so much screen time and they had so much history. It's like, come on, they're assuming that we just know that they had a tense relationship or some shit. They don't tell us anything. So it's like you said, all the Canto Bight stuff, Finn and Rose's whole story is just accomplished in other ways in the same movie. So it's utterly pointless. It's utterly pointless. My theory is that they introduced that whole scene just so that they could show the kid at the end.
Which
Hindsight tells us it amounts to nothing, but I think that was the whole point of that.
Yeah, it could be.
All right, let's get to the next one.
Well, really, I think my biggest dislike is, like, out of all these things, which there are, I've got about 16 things written here. A few of them are nitpicks. Most of them are actual gripes. But this one, they destroyed Hux as a character. He was such a great villain in the movie before. We dedicated at least 5 minutes to talking about him in our last review, about how scary he was as like a dictator type figure, and they made him an absolute joke. He got thrown around by Snoke and by Kylo 4 or 5 times alone. Just like he was the punchline in every scene he was in, and it makes no sense as to why. He was a very good character. He and Kylo were on equal footing in the last movie, and in this one they just made him just a complete and total waste. Yeah. Like I feel like it's worse than Phasma. At least Phasma was never built up as anything. Yeah. He was built up as a great character.
Right. And to add on to that, he got thrown around by Poe in the first opening scene, verbally and verbally through wits. He got thrown around by Poe.
Oh
he was just getting served the whole movie. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good segue into Snoke. I think that's one of my big complaints too, is the fact that they set up such a mysterious character with a ton of potential where you could go in terms of his power level, where his origin, whatever. We didn't need like a full origin like we got for Palpatine, but like, just anything. We know absolutely nothing about him at this point, and he's set up to be like the big bad and incredibly powerful, and then he's cut in half, which I sort of get why they did that, because they wanted Kylo to be like the main guy now, but it seemed so weird and like just a total waste of a character. And he's talking about being so incredibly powerful, and then Kylo basically like, wedges him. he pulls a prank on him and cuts him in half. Like it's really weird. It's really weird. So I was very disappointed in the whole Snoke thing.
Yeah.
Get back to Luke, I guess. Luke, I mean, this is character breaking for Luke's character.
Yeah, I agree.
This is completely throws the whole built character from the original trilogy. This person who's going to be literally the savior figure of this resistance and rebellion, and then it does everything completely against character in the rest of these, and even like going back to him giving up and thinking that Ben is going to be the most evil person in the world, and then attempts to murder him, even though he's telling a story and he's like, I had a moment of weakness and I stopped myself. But still, I mean, you didn't have that moment of weakness when you were saving your father, literally one of the most evil Sith, and
what people like to say to that is that you do see Luke lose it and like start like beating down Vader, but then he stops himself just in the same exact way.
It's a lesson learned. He learned already.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he completely forgets it.
That's the whole point of the character, is his pull to the dark side because of his lineage, and resisting it and becoming the greatest Jedi of all time. So then when they create this sequel, which when I saw The Force Awakens, I had high hopes. I thought it was really good. Obviously, if you listen to our last episode, I thought it was really good, and I was hopeful for the direction it was going to go. But then when this movie came out, it basically told me that they're actively trying to negate the events of the original trilogy. And in my opinion, I wish that this trilogy should have never existed. They should have never made it. If this was the direction they were going to go, I would trade The Force Awakens any day for this to not happen, because Luke is utterly ruined. He's totally ruined. His whole character arc in the original trilogy is now nothing. It's nothing. Yeah. I would totally have understood if he had failed, his new Jedi Order, and then went into exile as almost like a penance or whatever. But like abandoning the Force made no sense. He should have just been like, trying to recenter himself with the Force in order to regroup and in order to try and rebuild again, because he's not a quitter. He's never been a quitter. So it's just like this weird turn that they went through with him, and extremely disappointed in his story. Not to mention the way that he dies. What a buzzkill.
I wouldn't even have had that much of a gripe with the way he dies if he was actually physically there, and he did some kind of Obi-Wan thing.
Him dying is not the problem. It's the way that he died. Yeah. I would have actually preferred if he died like Yoda did, where he was just old. He had done his job training Rey, taught him everything he knew, and then was one with the Force. But the way that they did it in this movie is just, it was very strange. He's like this super powerful Jedi, and he dies because he got tired. Like it's really weird. Super weird.
He's using
it is a very confusing
injection, and it's like, okay, this force projection
Like,
super hard.
did he ever seem?
Yeah.
Did he ever come off as like weak? Like, did he ever like seem like frail in like the time that we had on screen with him before that? Because
No.
like,
He's
if we
pole
would have
vaulting.
had something like, yeah,
He's pole vaulting big old chasms over the ocean and spearfishing. You know.
Well, then he
And-
force pushes the whole building apart
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And
It's yeah.
yeah, he seemed fine. Like, I don't think force projecting himself should have killed him. It like they didn't allude to that being a problem at all. Like, it's just it was badly written. Like
Yeah,
that's the problem that pisses me off.
show us he's tired or whatever. Show us he's frail. Do something, because like
Or maybe
Yoda,
he's sick. Maybe
Maybe.
he has some kind of disease. That's something I don't know, but
But like
Bonitis?
when Yoda dies, he's he's like real slow, limping around his house, and then he gets in his bed and he's all like, "Oh, you could just tell he's gonna go." Like we don't see that with Luke at all. He's just like, "Oh, I went to crate with my force projection and I made fun of Kylo Ren and now I'm dead." It's like, how are you gonna talk shit and then die? Like it's so weird. He should have been on the planet. He should have been actually there. I would have been okay with him dying like a actual warrior, because the Jedi are based on samurai. That's like what they did. They believed in a warrior's death and all that stuff. It was it was just a really weird thing. You know what? I take back what I said earlier. The Canobite thing is my second biggest dislike. This Luke's story arc is the worst thing. Like I said, it negates his whole character. It's weird. But.
So moving on to another thing, like this really bothers me. Like, I feel like what we ended up getting with at the end of this movie going into the next movie, we had Kylo as the big bad and we had Rey as the hero. That was so boring and predictable. Yeah, sure, Kylo ended up switching sides towards the end of the next movie. Spoiler. But it's like, why not do something interesting? If you're going to change all this stuff, if you're trying to do something different, why not like flip him and make Kylo the good guy by the end of this movie and Rey the bad guy? You hinted for the entire movie that Rey was going towards the dark side, and obviously it keeps going into the next movie. Why not roll with it? Like, that would have been such an interesting turn to see Rey as the bad guy and Kylo have to try and redeem himself and then try and take her down at the same time. Like, just to see her gravitate towards, even if they kept on going with the Palpatine stuff, like, just have her, just embrace it. And I just feel like that would have been such a better storyline instead of, the predictable, boring stuff we got.
I don't necessarily like that direction, but I would have probably liked it more than this movie. Because I personally wanted Rey to be a Skywalker, and if she was going to be a Skywalker and turn to the dark side, that would have been kind of boring. We've seen that already. Either that or a Kenobi. I would have wanted her to be a descendant of a light side user. What we eventually know that what she turns out to be in the next movie, I would have probably been okay with that at that point. It would have retroactively probably smoothed
It's not
it over.
perfect, but
Yeah, but yeah, her turning to the dark side and Kylo turning to the light would have been more interesting than what we got probably. I actually would have liked if, and this is getting really deep into like fan theory stuff, but in Rebels has a kid named Ezra Bridger. At the end of that series, spoiler alert, he goes off into the Outer Rim, and we don't know what happens to him. We don't know if he's alive or dead. In one of the Star Wars dictionaries for this movie, for The Last Jedi, it talks about Snoke having had 2 apprentices, one of them being Kylo. So what could have happened is Kylo turns to the light in this movie, and then the next movie introduces the other apprentice, and Snoke's still alive. That could have worked. Maybe it would have been too late to introduce that character, or maybe we stick with what we got, and then a new character enters in to try and challenge Kylo for his throne in the next movie.
that would have been really interesting.
Yeah, that would have been better than. We'll get to that in the next one. The Rise of Skywalker, but yeah, like I said, I wouldn't have loved that, but it would have been better than this. What you said, Bobby.
I think the issue is with Rian Johnson writing this, not having known anything about pretty much Star Wars besides basic stuff.
Well, he
And
definitely didn't know anything about
watching-
Episode 7. That's for sure.
Not watching Episode 7. I don't know if he had a copy of the script or read it before post editing or something like that, and not knowing what things were edited, and I don't know. But I think that they were trying to introduce a lot of new characters for a new generation, in doing that, they forget about the old generation, and they're trying to placate, a new crowd. And I think doing that was a slap in the face when they probably could have easily balanced it out to bring in the new generation of viewers, a younger viewer, younger fan, and still not pleasing and not just placating, but pleasing and making the older fan happy. I mean, there's so many other ways they could have done this.
Well, let's look at The Force Awakens versus this movie. The Force Awakens obviously took old fans into account. They wanted to try and bridge the gap between old fans and introduce the property to newer fans. That's why it is essentially a remake of A New Hope, with a little bit of Empire thrown in there. This movie does the complete opposite. So J.J. Abrams understood what he needed to do to get people on board, and Rian Johnson, I don't know what he was thinking, to be honest. And I will claim until I die that he does not understand Star Wars at all. Like you said at the beginning of this episode, Bobby, he's a good filmmaker. Knives Out was fantastic. I loved it. I was surprised I loved it, because I still am so mad at him for this movie. But it's clear that he didn't understand the characters he was trying to write. And on top of that, seems to have abandoned everything that J.J. Abrams set up. So it's just twofold. It's two bad moves in one. So, yeah, it's...
And what I think supports that theory, too, is how defensive he got when people were panning this movie.
Yeah.
And he was just making fun of man babies, original Star Wars fans, man babies. It's like you alienated an entire, I don't know how many generations have come between then and there. 4 generations, maybe, Yeah. 3 or 4 generations since the original Star Wars was out. And that's how many people have invested time into these movies, into the prequels, and you slap them in the face and you're like, nope, this is for these people and me, and I'm going to do what I want. And then the way he was defending himself and how defensive he got in it, I think it was just he didn't know how to react, or he didn't know what to say, and so
he's very defensive.
He's just defensive. He has no argument for it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that box office is everything, but we have seen ever since Force Awakens a drop in box office for every movie that was released. Only one of those movies I do like in Solo. It felt the most Star Wars of this, since The Force Awakens. But this movie didn't perform as well as The Force Awakens did, and The Rise of Skywalker didn't perform as well as that. So we can see this backlash of the decision they made to go this direction. So, and go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just saying, and The Rise of Skywalker isn't that good of a movie either, so who knows if box office really matters. But yeah, it's an obvious trend.
Yeah, I see Disney and maybe trying to make up for that with a lot of the streaming stuff. Like Mandalorian was amazing. A lot of the standalone spin-off movies. I mean, I like Solo. I loved Rogue One. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to see what else they have, and I think that's where they're going to try to make it up to the fans that were maybe alienated in this new trilogy. And I hope to see that.
Do you want to know what's crazy? I just looked at the numbers. So The Force Awakens made $2 billion worldwide. It was about 1.1 international, 930 million domestic. The next one, The Last Jedi, went down to about 1.3 billion worldwide, and The Rise of Skywalker is 1 billion worldwide. Wow. Like that's a dramatic shift from where we started.
Yeah, it still made a ton of money. Lucasfilm isn't going to go out of business or anything, but but if you look at the tail off, that's not a really good sign. Yeah. So I think we got time for maybe one more dislike, and then we should wrap up and do our final ratings. So, what do you want?
Well, I would say I don't think we talked about it much. Rey's parents. That was a huge thing going from The Force Awakens into this movie, and whether he lied about it or not, whether Kylo even knew or not, I think we didn't get nearly enough of a resolution to that. Even if they had still hinted in this movie going into the next movie about him, that would have been fine with me. But they completely cut that storyline off at the knees, and just Rian Johnson didn't care about it. He's like, oh, no, it doesn't matter.
That too, and the Knights of Ren also. It's like
they're nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be found. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems like he wanted to do his own thing regardless of what came before the movie before, which I just feel like you can't. That's why the MCU is so good at what they do, because Kevin Feige makes sure that the movies make sense going one after another after another.
Yeah. Well, they have a general roadmap. You say what you want to say about the prequels, but George Lucas at least had a story that he wanted to tell that made sense. The way it was told. There's not stuff that is introduced that cancels out something that was introduced in the previous movie. Like there's no bait and switches. It's like, yeah, it's really really strange. And like I said many times, I don't think he understands Star Wars. It's just at the end of the day, I don't think he does. He's probably a Star Trek fan. All right, boys, let's get to our final rating. Let's see what you guys got. I'm going to be pretty harsh, so I'll save it for last. How about you, Bobby? You go first.
All right, so I'm trying to be as objective as possible. That's what I've been trying to do, keep an open mind throughout this whole watch. And I'm trying to consider, everything. I'm trying to consider story, acting, visuals, sound, just trying to get everything in there. I would go a 6.5 because the story just wasn't good. The acting, I think, was good. Not necessarily great, but good acting. I think the visuals were excellent, and the sound, as always, excellent. But the story, I think, weighs heavily for me, and it just didn't do enough to pull its weight. So I'd go a 6.5.
All right, what about you, Jay?
I'm along the same boats. I mean, if you look, I want to be as objective as possible, like Bobby said. If you look at this movie as a standalone movie, maybe a different Star Wars story, it might be getting, a 7.5 based on visuals, based on how it was executed, not based on story, obviously, because it wouldn't be the same story if it was a standalone movie.
Yeah.
But saying that, I do have to be subjective in being a Star Wars fan, and this basically being our review of it. So I have to go along with Bobby again and say a 6.5, and then I can't give it any higher than that.
Kevin's furious right now. You can tell.
No, I think those are fair scores. It's if you listen to our first episode ever of the NRDWave podcast, we rank the Star Wars saga, and I had Attack of the Clones at the bottom, and Attack of the Clones is clearly a worse movie than this. But for me, this movie, and I'm trying to sort of like I was gonna try and look at it on an objective level. If you weren't really a Star Wars fan, you might like this movie because it does some cool things. But as someone who has spent, I'm 33 years old and I started watching this stuff when I was 5. I've been a fan forever. I collect Star Wars merchandise. This movie this is a 5 for me. It's an F. It fails as a Star Wars movie. Like I said, if I weren't a fan, I'd maybe give it like a 7 because it wouldn't really make sense if I didn't know any of the background. So yeah, it's an F. It's a solid F. It would not pass my class. It's a bad movie.
It gets the lowest grade.
It gets the lowest grade. It did get the lowest grade from me. All right. So yeah, that's our general review of The Force Awakens. Of The Last Jedi. I think that I recommend if you are a Star Wars fan. Well, I don't know why you wouldn't have seen it already, but it's definitely worth a watch because it does have some visuals and it'll ignite some passion in you too. So don't avoid it. Watch the movie. Let us know what you thought yourself.
Sorry to interrupt. One scene that I don't know if we talked about, Yoda being in the movie, the scene with him and burning down the Jedi Temple. I thought that was a great scene, and it just the nostalgia of seeing Yoda in a movie is probably worth it, even though there's a lot of other bad stuff. So.
All right, so Bobby just caused me to revise my score to a 5.05. All right, everyone. Keep an eye out for our next review. We'll be doing The Rise of Skywalker. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know if you like this movie or not. I'm sure someone out there does. And until then, may the Fourth be with you, and keep treading that gnar.
Thanks for riding the wave.
Wow, you did it.